Nolan, for sure, he got the torch right now. I mean, that room changed drastically real fast with now he's the guy. Sweaty gone, myself, Milt left, all the guys, everything, all signs pointing is Nolan Smith, who got to take a big leap. He already did in the playing wise. Now he got to make sure that they vocally you address stuff that need to be addressed, because we got to make sure we practicing a certain way, making sure it's looking a certain way.
That was Brandon Graham on the Ross Tucker podcast, the Ross Tucker football podcast. He brought up something that really hasn't been discussed all that much this offseason, in that, hey, that defense last year lost a lot of leadership. Brandon Graham, Darius Slay, those guys, Josh Sweat are no longer here. He mentioned Milton Williams. Graham acknowledges that this player is going to have to step up and be a much bigger part of the Eagles' defense.
Well, I seen Jalix already, and he looked like he put on some weight, and he looked like he put on some good weight too at that. So I'm excited to see just him burst like how he's been. I mean, he's bursting off the line. Now he got a little weight on him. Now let's see, because it's all about stopping the run in this league. In order for you to rush and go get the quarterback, you got to stop first, second down, rush game, and you got to make sure that you in that backfield.
All right, that's Brandon Graham talking about Jalix Hunt and how big of a role that he might have. I thought a lot of interesting stuff from Brandon Graham. He was on the Ross Tucker podcast, as Geoff Mosher joins us now for Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash from the Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com. The Inside the Birds podcast you can get on all podcasting platforms. You can also check out Moshe's musings over at phillyvoice.com. He joins us now for Football at 4. Brandon Graham talked about the leadership role, and I think it's something that's kind of been glossed over a little bit here, Moshe, is that Darius Slay's gone, Josh Sweat's gone, Milton Williams is gone, Brandon Graham is gone, and we have talked a lot about them replacing them as players on the field. But as Brandon Graham kind of brought up there, hey, we're not there anymore. You got to keep practicing and doing everything the way that we did it. You can't now lose focus because we're not there. An interesting point that he brings up.
Yeah, and simultaneously, something I wrote about today for Philly Voice and something that Adam and I talked about on the podcast. This is a newer, younger than ever edition, EDITION, like new edition, the group, than ever before. I mean, when is the last time you would say that the elder statesman on the Eagles, in the Eagles pass rush or in the Eagles front four, right, is Thomas Booker at 25 years old? But that's what you have. You have Jordan Davis and Thomas Booker at 25. I believe Jalen Carter is 24. You've got Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt, who are both 24, if I'm not mistaken. Like your older guys are Josh Uche and Azeez Ojulari, right? So, and they're not that old themselves, by the way. So this is by far and away the youngest front four, including the depth and backups, that I can remember the Eagles having in quite a long time. And I do think that not only does that raise questions about them from an on-field standpoint, but also from a leadership and off-field standpoint.
Yeah, and, how important do you think that is? What kind of value do you put on a team that just won the Super Bowl, loses 4 starters, has to replace those starters, and now they're looking for a voice? Is that something that is important, not important? What do you think?
I don't think it's not the be-all to end-all. I'm going to just spitball. Like the Rams, by the end of last year, became a really good, ferocious defense, right? And that was basically led by a lot of rookies, second-year and third-year players, whether it was the rookies Verse and Fisk, and then they had a couple other guys, Byron Young and another pass rusher whose name is escaping me, and the Cam Curl was like a fifth-year player in their secondary. They may have had a couple of guys who were at linebacker who were a little bit older, but their primary impact players were all young players. But a guy like Cam Curl was a great leader for Washington. They let him walk, and he's there. So it's really about the caliber of person that you have. But that's where I think that you're also, the Eagles, they seem like a very good group, but we don't really know who they are because they haven't been around long enough. We know Jalen Carter came into the league with some issues, right? But he's been fine. It's been fine so far.
Do you, Moshe, let's stop at Carter. Do you look at him as a leader type?
I think you have to. When you're one of the best players in the league, and then you combine that with being one of the elder statesmen now at the position, right, which he is, then you kind of have to. I mean, but I don't know if he's ready for that per se. And that's not a knock. I'm just saying.
Well, how difficult is it to have to take on that role when you're not ready? Or, like Nolan Smith, that's who Brandon Graham brought up. Like, is Nolan Smith the kind of guy that profiles is not only are people looking at me to now go from the player that I am to that next step, now you also want me to be in charge of the locker room.
Yeah. And, and if you're going to take it a step further, I thought the person who was really becoming a leader of that defense, a young guy who is taking that next step to be that vocal guy, that presence, that steadying guy, was Nakobe Dean. And Nakobe Dean gets hurt. I mean, he's been hurt quite a bit, and his future is really uncertain past this year based on the moves that the Eagles have made. I thought in a different kind of way, and I know that Darius Slay probably wouldn't agree, but I think that at times Gardner Johnson showed maturity. You remember he got kicked out of the game against the Commanders, and then he put it on himself, which, was surprising. He didn't blame anybody, said, I got to be better. And he felt he had emerged into the locker room. I know Andrew DeCecco would write about guys commenting on how CJ Gardner Johnson would take them under their wing. But so whether or not you think he's a great leader or not, he's not there. And now you've got Reed Blankenship. You got a rookie in Drew Makuba. You have a third year player in Sidney Brown just trying to, make it to the team, right? So you really, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, it's not just the front seven there. There's just very few guys on this team that have that kind of clout and credibility and steadying presence that Slay and Graham and Cox he just retired 2 years ago, and Kelsey, right? But specifically on defense, bring to this team. And that's a great opportunity for somebody else to seize it. And maybe it's like Reed Blankenship, right? Or maybe it is Jalen Carter or somebody else, but we just haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, well, and I guess I'll throw this your way. I'll volley it back to Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast in Philly Voice. You have Brandon Graham mentioned this on a podcast somewhere, is the one thing that they have is stability in the coaching staff. So they have some leadership from their coaches where they don't have a new guy coming in, a new this, a new that. They have guys that everybody on this team should be familiar with.
I said it last year. I said the biggest change in the Eagles defense, and there would be plenty of them, was that there will be no equivocation. There will be no lack of understanding of what somebody's roles are, because not only do you have Vic Fangio, but you have all these coaches, whether it was Christian Parker, Clint Hurt, some other people he brought in who've worked underneath him. Like, the message was going to be trickled down, and it was. And there was no uncertainty about roles last year. Everybody seemed to exactly know, so much so that they just knew exactly where they were going to be. Appreciate the equivocation. For
the people watching who said, what does equivocation mean? There you go.
Make no mistake about it. That's what I mean when I say no equivocation. Make no mistake. I'm not doing
I said fait accompli last week, and somebody texted in, what does this French word that you used mean? So when I heard equivocation, I thought I might have to help some people in the audience there, which is okay. I'm sure it's not a word that is thrown out every day. Big words from Geoff Mosher. He went to Penn State. I did not. All right. So, yeah, I mean, you have the leadership questions that Brandon Graham brings up. He mentions a young guy like Nolan Smith. You mentioned Nakobe Dean as possibly, when he's there. Zach Bond, he'll be here for the second year now. Now maybe he feels a little different because he makes that money. His contract, gives him a bigger voice. I would imagine now like a Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, now that they're here a second year, maybe they have a little bit more of a voice. We'll see. But having the same coaching staff in place definitely helps out there. Mosher, I want to get your first thoughts. It becomes official. It's supposed to be today that Bryce Huff will be traded. I don't know if that actually is official yet, but he will be going to San Francisco. Not a surprise that they moved him, but what did you think of the whole him taking less money, what they worked out, how they got the deal, a mid-round pick? We don't know what that pick is yet unless it came out in the last hour or so. I have not seen any update there. But the overall Huff experience from Friday to today.
Yeah, so I'm going to credit Howie Roseman and then also criticize him a little bit in the same vein. I credit Howie because whether it was this, whether it was last year, Josh Sweat's contract situation, Dallas Goedert's contract situation. You've been following the team long enough to remember that earlier in Howie's career, things didn't go as smoothly when players were unhappy or disgruntled, and he didn't handle it the best, and they didn't handle it the best, and it would be, kind of muddled and messy with the organization. And I think Howie has done a really good job being transparent with the players on what he's going to do, whether they have to take a pay cut or if he's got a trim budget, or in this case with Bryce Huff, we'll move you. It didn't work out. Be transparent about it. I imagine that's why he wasn't at OTAs. I imagine he was told not to go to OTAs. Don't risk getting hurt. And Howie's not afraid also to say, we goofed here. I made a mistake and live with it. Now he gets a little lucky when Zach Baun turns out to be a player who can cover up the fact that Bryce Huff didn't work out very well, and that Devin White didn't work out really well. And that's the only area I'll be a little bit critical of Howie, and I think he probably has to do a better job of identifying players that fit the scheme better, because this goes back to even like Terrell Edmonds a couple of years ago. It's certainly not the type of guy who was playing in the type of scheme the Eagles running. He was like a box linebacker with the Steelers, and they were asking him to do a lot of, Fangio style, even though he wasn't the defensive coordinator. They were still doing that.
So who do you think this Huff signing was more on, Fangio or Roseman?
No, I think it was on Howie. I would say that his best years in with the Jets, and that's why he's reunited with Robert Saleh, is when he gets to spread out, put his hand in the dirt, and rush the passer. But Vic Fangio wants his outside linebackers to be stand-up rushers because he's a sim pressure guy. He doesn't blitz a lot. So he wants a little bit of guesswork at times to be able to drop an outside linebacker and rush maybe like Cooper DeJean from the nickel or Nakobe Dean or Baun from the linebacker spot. That's not really the best usage of Bryce Huff. Bryce Huff was better when he had his hands in the dirt. So I think, listen, I'm not saying Bryce Huff is completely absolvable. You figure out a way, but he clearly was not meant for what Vic Fangio is doing, and he then didn't help himself by not trying, I guess, to be better at it. And the Eagles knew that they were moving on to Jalix Hunt and Nolan Smith. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, so without Huff, I would imagine this plan was in their mind anyway. Hey, we're going to try to find a way to get rid of this guy. He's not a part of our plan at all. That's why you signed Uche and Ojulari. You have to enter saying we think that Hunt is going to be our guy, and we'll let the other two guys kind of battle for the rotational snaps because Huff was never a part of their plans.
That's what my sense is, that they were moving on to Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt, and they were going to fortify as much as they could, but that Bryce Huff wouldn't return. Bryce Huff could not return. Like, he made too much money for a guy who was going to have no role and didn't even have an advocate. It would be one thing if Vic Fangio said, right. It would be one thing if Vic Fangio threw his arm around the kid and say, we're going to build him up in year 2, or, at all times last year, even when he got there, before he got his wrist injury, Vic was saying things like, well, he's got to prove that he can do this and prove that he can play and prove he can handle that. So he's really a designated pass rusher who shouldn't really be out there in run defense and should be able to, spread out and put his hand in the dirt and rush the passer.
Yeah, I think, that part of it there is that he didn't really have someone saying, it's like when you get that guy who's a first-round pick and the other team says, I don't, this guy stinks, and the other team says, I'll take him because we think we can get first-round talent out of him. It feels like the Eagles looked at him and said, yeah, we don't think we can get anything more out of this guy. We got as much. But I would counter that by saying, he got hurt. He missed a bunch of games. So, I don't know. Maybe it was taking him a while to get the system down. Then he gets hurt. And then at that point, Hunt kind of usurps him and bounces him.
Yeah. And, Hunt has – I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but we know that Hunt got drafted in the 3rd round despite playing at Houston Christian because he is an athletic freak of nature. The things he's done athletically and tested, the way he tested athletically was just so tantalizing, right? So, usurp. Did I say usurp or you say usurp?
I said it.
Okay, all right. So
you had a raise of the eyebrow when I threw a usurp out there.
I did. I liked it. So it just became pretty clear that the Eagles in Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt had a really good foundation, and you're not going to pay Bryce Hunt that money to maybe try and fight to be the 3rd defensive end unless I mean, you'll pay money for a third defensive end or edge if that guy's going to play a lot.
I also feel like you can't have a guy making the money he was making standing on the sideline.
Right.
Just standing there thinking, because this is where you get a guy who becomes a locker room problem. Or
sure. I mean, he's not happy.
Yes, exactly. He has the money standing there, not playing, then that becomes an issue.
Right. Now, I know everybody's going to pile on Bryce Hunt because that's what fans do for their Bryce Huff, because that's what fans do when a guy plays bad and goes elsewhere. But I honestly believe it's a win-win for both these teams. I do believe Bryce Huff
I was going to say, what's going to happen.
49ers system is going to play well.
He's going to go over there and get 11 and a half sacks, and then people are going to say, why couldn't they get 11 sacks out of him here?
Yep. No matter how much we have this conversation, you could replay the conversation you and I just had and what I wrote for Philly Voice. People could read it. It won't matter because people live in the moment and they become prisoners of the moment. But I expect him to be successful. I don't know about 11. I mean, he's going to play in a line with Bosa. He's going to play with the kid they drafted out of Georgia, Michael Williams. So he'll be that number 3 edge guy. And, he'll probably pick up. They're probably going to be down in a bunch of games too because I think the 49ers will be better, but defensively they're a little bit So he'll get some opportunities to rush the passer.
Does Trey Hendrickson profile as a guy they would go after?
The Eagles or the Niners?
The Eagles. Like contractual problems, says he's going to hold out the whole year. Or do you look at this team and say, they like Hunt too much, they like what they have too much, they don't want to go out and get another guy?
No, I don't think I think they would certainly be interested. And like I said, you'll pay money for a number 3 edge rusher if he's going to play 50 to 60% of the snaps, even if he's coming off the bench. But he wouldn't. I mean, you could then live with another year of J.L.X. Hunt being your number 3 on the second year of a deal and just having this great 3-man edge rotation. Plus, if anybody gets hurt, you're good. Because right now, you're hoping, Mike. You're hoping Azeez Ojulari stays healthy. He's missed a third of his games played in his career because of injury. You're hoping Josh Uche can figure out a way to be good. He has had one good year in his career, and now it's on his 3rd team in 3 years. So you don't have great depth right now.
I feel better about Ojulari than I do Uche.
I would agree with you. I think most people would agree with that.
Okay, Geoff Mosher, you can check him out at Philly Voice. Check out the podcast, Inside the Birds, on the Inside the Birds platforms, wherever you get your podcasts. Of course, every Monday and Wednesday, Moshe is here for Football and 4. Adam Kaplan will be here tomorrow. The calendar has turned to June, which means we're 1 month away from training camp month.
Stop it, you.
Just saying.
You stop it right now.
All right, man. Thanks.
Enjoy my summer. Take care.
There's Geoff Mosher, everybody, from the Inside the Birds podcast, which you can get on all podcasting platforms. Just search Inside the Birds.